Welcome, everybody, to the Just Add Bourbon podcast. I'm Jimmy Don Kerr.
And I'm JD Darren.
And it is another beautiful Sunday evening here in the hills of Eastern Kentucky. And we're without Brad today. Brad had some work engagement that he had to take care of today. And he'll probably miss the next couple of episodes with us. He's getting a new store open. So I honestly haven't even seen him this weekend. Normally I see him every weekend. Or most days throughout the week, and I've barely seen the man. He's working hard right now. So, but we're glad you could join us. We're going to have probably a very serious conversation this evening, maybe a little controversial, and we're going to talk about the things that have been going on in our country for the past 2 or 3 weeks. We have not actually had a chance to sit down together because we started doing these interviews, and we were able to get so many good people to come on and sit down and talk to us that we just kind of focused on that for a few weeks and have been dying to get back together and actually have this conversation.
So the interviews were a lot of fun, though. The interviews were
awesome, man. Yeah. I said I had a great time doing that, and I'm looking forward to the ones we got coming up.
Yeah, the one Thursday I think is going to be excellent, man.
Yeah, I think it'll be good too. So before we go any further, JD posted a little earlier. This podcast in the last probably month and a half has just really started to grow, and we want to capitalize on that momentum. So what we're asking everybody to do is, if you're watching this feed, is to share it, then post in the comments, shared. And if we can get to 50 shares on this podcast live on Facebook, we will give someone $100. And I don't know if JD will give them cash. We'll get them a gift card. We'll do something, but it'll be $100.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do that. And then the other thing too is go to YouTube and subscribe. I mean, we've got over, 1,400 followers on Facebook, JD. And I think we've got maybe 50 or so subscribers on YouTube. And as we want to grow, because we're looking to build a studio, we're really looking to kind of, take this thing to the next level. We need to get those YouTube subscribers. So we have to have at least 1,000 to be able to monetize the podcast. So we're going to ask that you go on there. And it's not something we normally do on here, but we're going to ask tonight because we believe a lot of people will view this. This is going to be an important conversation that JD and I have. And we want as many people to see it as possible. So share this and then go to YouTube and subscribe to the Just Add Bourbon page. You can actually listen to all the old podcasts and see the videos of the interviews that we've done and all that. All right. So JD, before we get into like the real serious conversation here,
right?
Are both your ears pierced?
Oh yeah. You like that? Look at that.
Yeah. Looking good, buddy. What got into your mind to do that?
Huh?
What got in your mind to pierce your ears?
I just decided I was going to embrace this midlife crisis.
Grab it with both hands.
Yeah. Ride this thing out. Let's see where it goes.
I tell JD all the time, JD's one of those cats that can do things that I don't think I can do. Like I've seen him wear the hat. I don't know what you call those hats, JD, but it's
hat or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And JD can pull that off and looks good on him. And I think the ear piercing kind of suits you too, man. Yeah, look at that. Look, watch him show, ladies, right there.
What up, girls?
So, first thing, JD, it's been a while since we've been able to talk, and we've seen the country. I don't know, man. It's just been crazy the last, month, whatever. You got COVID-19, and then this thing with George Floyd essentially being murdered. And I told somebody the other day, I said, it's like the Black Plague, the Great Depression, and the 1960s all happened in like 3 months. It's the craziest thing. I mean, 2020 has been the craziest year.
I blame it on we killed a Romney, man. It's been downhill ever since.
right, that's it. So before we start, something that it's important for me to say this, because I've told JD this multiple times, I am not really comfortable talking about race. And the reason for that is I'm a white guy who will never know what it is to be a black man in America. I actually live and grew up in a place that's 99.99999% white. And I always felt like it was kind of tone deaf to even talk about things that the black community needs to do, because it's one of those things where it annoys me, JD, for people to comment on Eastern Kentucky when they don't live here and know what it is to grow up here.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, it's tough because if you're just, I know myself. Like, it's easy to say one little thing wrong, and then you're labeled a racist, forever. And us putting ourselves out here on a podcast, on Facebook Live, I know myself, and it's gonna be living forever, man. But I think it's 2020, the world's gone crazy. It's time to two white guys sit down and have a talk about race, man. Let's talk about it. And if we're uncomfortable with it, then all the better for it. Maybe we'll get some comments we can bring in, and I'm just going to put it out there now. I'm sure some of the people in the black community are not going to be happy with some of the things I say, and I'm sure some people in the white community aren't going to be happy with the things I say, and that's okay. And if you guys disagree with me, hey, holler at me. You know this about me, man. I think you've learned this about me. I will change my opinion. If I'm wrong, I will definitely change my opinion. If I am convinced I'm wrong, I have no problem changing my opinion. And I'm all ears. I like having these debates on Facebook and things because I want to know, man. If I'm going wrong, if I'm looking at it from the wrong perspective, I want to know it.
Sure. And so
let's put it out there and let's just see what it is, man.
Yeah, and we want everybody, if you're watching, we want you to comment. We're going to try to talk about some of the questions you may have here on the show. JD and I will kind of kick these things back and forth and talk about. So, JD, let's just start at the genesis of the whole thing for the last, 2-3 weeks, and that's the death of George Floyd. And I'll start with this. I've watched that video one time. And the reason that I watched it only one time is because I couldn't watch it again. George Floyd was murdered. Okay. And I don't care if you're white, you're black, you're Hispanic. I don't care. And I don't even care what you've done, what crime you committed. You do not deserve to be treated in that manner. The man was subdued, handcuffed on the ground, and the guy sat with his knee on his neck for over 8 minutes.
Yeah.
And what was so scary, or like even sad, JD, is that the guy almost went like to infantile state. He was begging for his mom. Yeah. And it was so sad to watch. And, I had somebody ask me the other day, they said, well, why do you think it's popped off because of this? And I said, I think it's because of that video. That video was so powerful, so scary. It was so sad. I don't know any other way to say it. I mean, it was awful to watch, and I think it just really struck home with everybody.
Man, like I watched a lot of those videos, and none of them's easy to watch. None of them are. But that thing, man, what struck me was this was in broad daylight in front of witnesses on camera, and this guy just he didn't even care. He stayed on this dude's neck for over 8 minutes. Now he's gonna get a trial, all these things. But as far as I'm concerned, that dude murdered him. And people were just yelling at the guy, "Hey man, what do you want from him? What do you want him to do? Like he's out." And it's almost like he dug himself into that position, like he just wasn't going to move to prove a point. And it brings up the question, has this guy done this before and he got away with it? Maybe the person lived. I don't know. And it also brings up the question of, is it racially motivated? I don't know. Is it a power trip? Was this guy on a power trip? I don't know. All I know is this guy was emboldened and he was entrusted with the public to do a service, to serve and protect. And for him to disgrace that trust the way he did, it was just a shame. And it was heart-wrenching to watch, man. It was just really tough.
It really was. And I'm very pro cop, okay? And this has almost turned into, and this is some stuff we'll get into, it's turned into like an anti-cop thing. And I don't want people to think of it that way. I'm not even sure that it was a race thing. I'm not sure. I think you just had an asshole who was a cop that was a bad person. And like you said, maybe on some kind of power trip. I don't know. I don't know what was in that man's heart. I have no idea. And Emily Osborne, JD, had just, messaged on here, said they deserve a trial by jury. And she's talking about George Floyd, and she's right. That man is not the judge, jury, and executioner. He was the executioner in this case. Right. But the man had a right. I don't care what George Floyd did. And from what I can tell, he may have had a checkered past somewhat.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter.
No.
I tried to put myself in that position. If that was me, or if that was you, you're one of my best friends. And if he had you down like that, would I want that for you? No, nobody should be treated that way. So I don't think anybody disagrees on that particular point, that if you've seen that video, what happened there was uncalled for and not right.
Absolutely.
So what kind of, I guess where I want to talk about next, JD, is from the police officer standpoint.
Yeah.
Do you think this is bad cops, bad policing? Do you think this guy was just a bad man and got caught on camera? Like, what do you think?
I don't know. Like, I don't know the guy. I know that he's had like almost like, I think 18 or 19 complaints in the past. And so this guy just seems like you said, man, he's probably just an asshole. Like, he's probably just a bad cop who was on a power trip. I mean, I know cops, man, they put the badge on. I don't know if they're allergic to that metal, makes their head swell or what happens, but they used to get on this trip. I'm not saying, definitely not saying all cops are bad. I'm definitely pro cop guy, but I'm also saying we got to get rid of these guys. This is one of those jobs you can't have any bad cops. You can't have them.
No, I agree with that, because when you are, I know how I am anyway when it comes to police officers. Like, I try to treat those guys with respect because they have a dangerous job, okay? And I can't imagine what it's like for your job to be one that you roll up on somebody in a car and you have no idea if they have a gun. You don't know what's going to go on, and you're going up there risking your life every single time that you do. So every time a police officer steps out the door to go protect and serve, they're putting their life on the line in most cases. And I'm trying to verbalize this the right way. They see a lot.
Sure.
So you don't know what their mental state is. They see a lot of death. They see a lot of things with kids. They see a lot of drugs. They see what drugs does to the community because they're policing those communities. Look, to do that job, you got to be a special person, but you also have to be held to a higher standard, because you literally are packing around a gun where you could take somebody's life, and you've got to hold yourself to a higher standard, in my opinion.
Well, the public's entrusted you to serve and protect, and we've given you the tools to do that. You know, not only the belts and the guns and the handcuffs, but we've also spent taxpayer money for the training to make you be able to handle situations that Joe Schmo down the road here can't handle. So you are held to a higher standard. And when that trust is broken, it's a very, very bad thing. It's not like people are saying, oh, this guy down the road killed this person. It's not a cop. It's a totally different thing when you put a cop into the equation, somebody who's been entrusted with, you know, serving and protecting his community.
Sure. Well, and I try to, compare. It's hard to compare where we live to, the inner city or in the city, right? But because most of the cops around here, we know them personally.
Right.
They're probably family. We've probably barbecued with them at some point or another. I mean, we know these people. You go into these bigger cities, these guys don't live there. They don't live where a lot of the, black community lives and, in these poor areas. They don't live there. So you got, 10 white guys rolling in, trying to crack down. I mean, it's going to create tension.
Disconnect, man.
Yeah, there's a big disconnect. And I was telling you, and I know I always go to TV shows and movies and things like that, but I watched that show, The Wire. It's on HBO, highly recommend, with JD's password. And which I did get my own, by the way, when HBO Max came out, I got my own. But it was something in Baltimore, and it was kind of a true story. And one of the things that you hear a lot right now are defund the police, community policing, things like that. And what in this particular season of The Wire, because it was based on a true story, what they did for community policing is they didn't change anything. Like, the police were still there, but the police went into those communities and tried to get to know the people that they were, serving.
Sure.
And it actually worked for them, because it actually made it real. If they got in a situation with somebody where normally they might pull their gun first, they didn't, because they knew the person. So, I mean, we're not experts by any means, but what do you think is the steps? Because when they talk about defund the police, they're not saying like get rid of the police. That's not really what that means.
So, like, one of my ideals, man, I don't know. I'm just, throwing things at the wall and see if they stick. I don't know. My ideals was, You know, these guys that have all these complaints put onto them, and you know, if a complaint comes in on a cop, instead of having cops who could be that cop's buddy and covering up for him, instead of going to him for a review of the complaint, we'd have an independent investigation, and that cop has to go before the city council or private citizens, and they handle the situation. I think that would be a much better first step anyway.
What about like training, for example? You know, both you and I both listen to a lot of Joe Rogan, and I've heard them talk a lot about, you know, teach them jujitsu where, you know, it's not lethal, but you can subdue them. And then once you get them subdued, you're good. You don't have to apply lethal force.
Yeah, but I mean, that's true. But I mean, as we've seen with George Floyd, I mean, that dude was subdued for 4 minutes, man. You know what I'm saying? He was, I mean, Breonna Taylor, I mean, they kicked her door down, went in and shot her. She was in her bed. So it's not that, and then not to take away from the training, because the training's important, but the Chauvin guy who killed George Floyd, he's a 19-year veteran of the police force. So he's had plenty of training. What we need is better training. And we need better people in those positions.
So JD, I don't want to interrupt you, but Zach Briggs on the feed, it said, define what you think defund the police means, please. So maybe I'm misunderstanding its meaning.
So defund the police, what they're really trying to say, it's a terrible phrase because it's not what they're saying. What they're saying is cut back on some of the money that you are sending to the police departments, these big militarized police departments, and spend that money in the communities. Because we all know that the social places that you go, you know, the society you live in has a big impact on the things you do. You know, I read a book, just finished it this past week, called The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. And one of the things when they started cracking down on crime in New York in the 90s, one of the first things they stopped was people jumping over the bars at the subway stations and not paying the thing. And then when they stopped that, they stopped other crimes from happening. And then they stopped the graffiti and they cleaned up everything. It's one of those things so before them, when they was allowing those things were leading to the guys that were not paying the tolls were now carrying guns or carrying drugs. And they led to prostitution, led to gambling, you know, all these illegal panhandling, all these things. So when they cracked down on the toll jumping, it had a ripple effect all the way down. So when they say defund the police, they're talking about taking that money away and cleaning up these communities, you know, building parks, building community centers, you know, things like that, building libraries. That's what defund the police is. And it's like getting rid of the militarization of the police departments, which is a big thing I agree with.
When did that militarization start, JD? Do you know? Because I know it's been a while. It's been like that for a while.
In the 60s is when it really started.
When the civil rights
movement started is when the militarization of these police departments started.
And, you know, and probably to Zach's point, there are probably some people out there that have this idea of a utopia where there is no police force. And when they say defund the police, that's probably what they mean. The definition that I've heard of it is that police departments are rewarded. You know, they have a budget, but if they do not police with some, I guess, decency maybe is the right word, JD, or just respect everybody or the people of the community that they serve, that they could lose some of their funding.
Right.
And that makes sense to me. I mean, you know, everything's tied to money, right? So, you know, if you are an area like Minneapolis, I had no idea about this until this started, but apparently that place is a hotbed for stuff like this.
I didn't know that either.
I didn't either. And so apparently it is. So why not, in those cases, if you have a lot of incidents like that, you tie it to your budget and tie it to their budget, and maybe you get some money taken away.
So I think it's important to realize how we got here too, though. Like, so in the 1990s, it actually started in the 70s, but in the 90s, they did again. They went back into Kansas City to really crack down on the crime in Kansas City. They had the highest homicide rate in the nation. And they figured out that all this crime was coming from these certain neighborhoods, right? And so what they did was they got really aggressive in these neighborhoods, and they allowed these cops to pull over these vehicles and do searches for any little a blinker route, a missed turn signal, rolling through a stop, just any little infraction. They could pull you over, and they would find a reason to search your vehicle, and ended up confiscating a lot of guns. Really worked in those high crime neighborhoods, really dropped the crime rate. But what happened was they also figured out they was writing a lot of tickets and making a lot of money. And so what they decided to do in these other cities was expand it outside the neighborhoods where the high crime was. And it caused a huge mistrust between the communities they were supposed to be serving and the cops, because they're using these aggressive Kansas City style traffic stops on guys where there's no high crime.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
So, again, I go back to, it's a dangerous job. And, and when I'm trying to think in my head, just trying to, like I said, I'm not an expert on this, but I'm trying to think, one, they've been getting trained for years. They just need better training. And I think maybe teaching them, tactics where like jiu-jitsu or something like that, where they can subdue them fairly easy, get them down, get them handcuffed in the car. I think that's a good idea. I don't mind the idea of, if you perform at a high level, you get your full budget. If you have issues such as this, and it's proven that you have an issue, then they can take some of your funding away. I think that's good. I think the demilitarization is actually probably a good thing. And using some of that money in these communities to, like you said, help primarily with education, specifically in, these low income communities. I mean, not, much less than us. We talked to Charles Booker that day. And the thing that he said that just stood out to me is that the west end of Louisville, which, for the lack of a better term, and excuse me, is the low income, what they would call a ghetto, has more in common with the people of Eastern Kentucky and Appalachia than they do with the rest of Louisville. And that really stuck out to me. And he's really taken a big lead role. And we were lucky enough to talk to him, before that and wish him the best in his candidacy. And so I try to look at those things, and I think those are all good ideas. But again, at the end of the day, do you think, I don't know what I'm trying to verbalize here. Do you think that's enough, or do you think that is something that is systemic?
Well, it's definitely systemic, I think. But I think that you got to start somewhere. You got to start making these moves. And we got to start making them now, because too many people are losing their lives. And not even losing their lives, man. Families aren't getting justice a lot of these times. I mean, that Ahmaud Arbery, who was killed in Atlanta, the guy didn't get arrested for 2 months after shooting him. Like, what are we doing here?
I think that's really what jumped it off in Minnesota, was because they hadn't arrested that guy yet.
It was, yeah, absolutely.
And it was pretty clear to me anyway. You watched the video, it's pretty clear what happened. And they waited those few days, man. That's what really caused it to pop off.
Here, Josh Muncy has a good comment. Did you see this?
Yeah, I saw it.
I think there should be a nationwide set of policies when it comes to subduing and arresting people. These policies should be used in every agency nationwide. Citizens could then educate themselves on these policies so that they know when they or someone they know are being mistreated by dirty cops. Josh, that makes a lot of sense to me, man.
Yeah, it does. That makes a ton of sense, Josh. I think that's a great comment, and so this is one of those things, like I said, I want to have a real conversation here. Okay. And
Sure.
One of the things I told JD before we came on, you will get accused of being a racist for anything these days. I don't care what you say.
Right.
You will get accused of being a racist. And that is a, part of the media. And we'll get to that here in just a little bit and the things that they do. There's these videos that come out, like when a cop pulls me over, I immediately get my license. I put my hands kind of almost on my lap,
Right.
And I treat them with a great deal of respect. I do not back talk. I might question, but I try to do it in a very respectful tone. And I've seen some videos, how you see these videos and you don't know if it's BS or not. I mean, there's so much out there where they'll get pulled over and they immediately, what I do, and instantly people just start running their mouths. Well, that's going to kick it up too. Right. With the cop, they're going to get nervous and things like that. What do you think about that? Should people, when the police approach them, just try to, treat them with respect and try to go that route?
I think that's the smarter route. I think people should, but I know people are people too. And the thing is, we can only control one part of this element, and that's the people we pay with our tax money.
Right.
So we can't really control who's getting pulled over and who's, how they're going to behave. We can control how the people that we were paying behaves.
Right.
So that's where we got to focus. But I mean, I'll give you an example. I told you about Sandra Bland. I don't know if you guys remember about Sandra Bland. Sandra Bland was from, I think, Chicago. She moved to Texas. And she's driving down the road, and a cop pulls up right behind her bumper. And what do you do if a cop gets behind you and he's speeding? He's trying to get by. What do? You pull off, or you pull to the next lane, let him go by. So she changes lane, let him go by. He flips his blue lights on, pulls her over for either signal.
Wow. Yeah.
Ends up approaching her window, opposite side, passenger side, gets her license, registration, all that stuff. She's obviously annoyed because she did what she thought was the right thing to do, trying to get out of his way. He goes back, writes her a warning, comes back up, approaches her driver's side door, hands her the paper. She's smoking. And he goes, "What's wrong? You seem agitated." She goes, "Well, yeah, I am agitated. I'm pissed off." "Well, could you put your cigarette out?" "Well, I don't know why I'd have to put my cigarette out." Now, does she have to put her cigarette out? Does he have a right to tell her to put her cigarette out?
Probably
Absolutely
not. No.
And so she goes, "No, I don't want to put my cigarette out." She goes, "Okay, we can just step out of the car." "Well, I don't want to step out of the car." So he ends up dragging her out of the car and placing her under arrest. And she kills herself in jail 2 days later. So, I mean, better training, man. That guy did what he was trained to do, but it's not good training. He's not in a high crime area. He's out in the middle of a back road in Texas, man. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
He's treating this woman like it's an inner city drug stop. You know what I mean? It's just crazy to me.
So I feel like there's, or at least the media makes it appear that there's an issue with this in the black community. And so out of the George Floyd, you had these protests erupt, you had riots break out. And I'll kind of give you my take on that first. Of course, we've said it on here many times. Protests are a good thing. That's almost one of your God-given rights as an American citizen, is the right to be able to, protest in a peaceful manner.
Right.
And that brought up a couple of things, like with Colin Kaepernick.
Sure.
But, and you had a lot of peaceful protesting. I mean, there was a lot of that going on, but you also a bunch of rioting and opportunists taking advantage of a situation and burning down businesses and going into stores and looting. And it wasn't black people by themselves. There were white people there with them, doing the exact same thing, tearing crap up. I will never be okay with a riot. Now, I told JD once before, sometimes a little violence helps. Okay. Most things in this country that moved in a positive direction, there was some violence that occurred. And I'm not saying that you need to go burn down somebody's business. I mean, they burnt down businesses, people that had nothing to do with this. I mean, it was people in their own community, burnt their businesses down. It'd be like, I don't know, JD, a defensive coordinator in another town gets, picked up on some kind of charge, and now we're protesting defensive coordinators, and they go burn down your house. Right. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Right. That's stupid. Right. So the rioting part, I can't get behind. Like I said, a little bit of violence here and there, tearing some stuff up, but they almost burnt Minneapolis down. It looked like a war zone. Now that's a little too much. In New York, they were just wide open because the cops weren't doing anything. Right. They were just wide open. I think the protests have been good. And what really, for me anyway, makes me feel good is I think that we have, because I've always believed that racism was a generational thing. And maybe I'm ignorant to believe such, but I think you see that things are better because in these protests, you have white and black people arm in arm protest more than you've ever seen.
Sure.
And I mean, in little communities like here in Eastern Kentucky, we don't even have any black folks here. Yeah. There is no black people in Eastern Kentucky. And there were protests here, peaceful protests. It's like, people get it. This is enough. If this is what's going on, enough is enough. And so I'm absolutely for the peaceful protest, and I think it will work. But it really got people's attention when the looting and the rioting started. And it was something, JD, I wanted to touch on with Colin Kaepernick. And it was something I told you that at the time, I did not agree with it at all.
Right.
All right. I did not agree with him kneeling during the national anthem. I still don't.
Right.
Okay. I still don't agree with that as that type of protest, but it is, I do believe now, and this has changed for me. I believe that I do not have the right to judge him for how he chose to protest, because it did get some attention, but nothing really happened.
Yeah. Well, I think the problem was, first off, why Colin Kaepernick took a knee. It started out with him just sitting on the bench. I don't know if you knew that or not.
Yeah.
It started out with him just sitting on the bench and not doing anything during the national anthem. So a Green Beret wrote him a letter or tweeted him or emailed him, whatever. Got in contact with him. He said, I'd like to talk to you about it. So they meet, and when the Green Beret says, I'd rather you kneel. And so that's when Colin started kneeling during the national anthem. At the request of a veteran.
Yeah.
And so what else happened? You know, we have all these people, we're for peaceful protests. We're peaceful protests. The problem was when we had peaceful protests, everybody was not listening. It turned into a right-wing political talking point instead of what the issue was. And if we just focused on the issue then, maybe we wouldn't be where we are now. That's how I feel about it. So, I mean.
No, that's fair. I mean, that's a fair assessment. I mean, because, you know, like I said, I will never agree with kneeling, and my dad was a tough man. Okay. He was a tough guy, and we used to walk in the mornings, and people who knew him knew he walked all the time. He would be walking the road. You know, that's how he got exercise. And I would walk with him in the mornings. And one day he told me, he said, look, because we were having a similar, not this kind of conversation, but we were having a conversation about race, and I was asking questions, trying to understand some things. And he said, look, number one, you are an American. Number two, you are a Kentuckian. Number three, you're an Eastern Kentuckian. Number four, you're a Martin Countyan. Number five, you're a man. The color of my skin never came into it, because my dad had a belief in that flag in our country for what, I'm not sure. He was in the military, but he had a belief in what our country stood for and the idea behind what the United States of America could be. And he would always tell me, he said, son, it's not perfect. He said, we have a very, very checkered history. He said, with slavery and different things, he said, those are bad things. He said, but we are the one country that will try to change. And so for me, being raised with that belief, that's why for me, that flag stands for something. The idea of what that flag stands for means something to me. So the kneeling part bothered me.
Right.
But it also means that I have no right to judge Colin Kaepernick and the way that he chose to protest. And I completely changed on that. That's one of those things where I feel like I can change too. I'll listen. If I think I'm wrong, I don't care to say it and change. And that's something that I truly, believe in. And my dad, it used to drive him nuts when black people would call themselves African Americans.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, why? He said, because they're Americans. It doesn't matter what color your skin is.
It's really a silly description. African American really doesn't make any sense, right? You know, I had a good friend from England. He was married to a white lady from Morocco, but she now lives in America. Was she African American?
Right.
But she's not black,
Yeah.
So African American is not a race, okay? And if you get technical about it, race ain't really a thing anyway. It's all societal. Anyway, I know the difference in a people's skin tone. It just doesn't matter to me. You know what I mean? That's all. What was we talking about though?
Right. Well, let me tell you something. This is something Brad actually said, since he's not on here. It's something Brad told me the other day, and I thought was really interesting. Is he said, look, when people talk about racism, he said, because I even have said it, my job is to raise my kids to not be bigots and to treat everyone the same. And he said, now think about that. He said, because he grew up in a place where there were Hispanics, black people, all kinds, it was very diverse. And he said, when they're kids, he said, we're telling our kids now, just because they're different doesn't mean we should treat them any different. But in a child's eyes, they're looking at him and say, well, he's a different color than I am, so he is different, but he's just my friend. Yeah. He said, we're teaching them to make the difference when we say, look, don't do that, you know, and at a young age, and he's right. Because if you make no difference, it doesn't matter who they are. Just treat them with kindness. Be good to them. They're your friends. Treat them well.
And racism is nothing new, man. This didn't, you know, it's something we've dealt with since the beginning of time. And I told you the story, man, and I'll tell it on here about me going to Johnson Controls and working in Tennessee. You know, I was 17 years old. My first job, I was working in a factory. And I'd be on the line with some, you know, some white guys, some black ladies, some black guys, some white ladies. I mean, just the mix-ups. And we'd all be cutting up online, you know, working away. And the bell would ring to go to lunch. And we'd go out there at the picnic area, and the white people would sit here, and the black people would sit over there. And it just blew my mind. And I don't know that that was racism, or just that, you know, birds of a feather flock together. You know what I'm saying, man? Like people you like, you sit with.
Right.
And I feel like people that come from the same cultures and raised in similar ways are going to do that. But for me at 17 years old, to see people separate like with race like that, especially being in Tennessee in the South, I was like, man, that's interesting. You know, I was in Pulaski, Tennessee, where the KKK was originated, where I was working at.
Right.
And
well, I had a similar experience, JD. You know, my dad even told me, he said, you know, growing up, he said, I was probably a little racist. He said, I just didn't know any better, you know, and I mean, I told you I had an uncle, a great uncle who I loved dearly,
right.
was one of the most racist people I've ever been around in my life. And he always told the story. He got out of the military, got out of the army, got off a bus in Cincinnati, and 5 black dudes jumped him, beat him within an inch of his life, and stole everything that he had. And from that point on, he hated black people, just hated them. Right. And I was like, let it make any sense. There's, you know, 13 million, you know, black people out there. That 5 ruined the whole thing for you. Yep. And he was like, yeah, it did. You know, and then my old man was like, look, he said, because I was talking to him about that, and he said, you know, look, when I went off to the military, he said, I was probably a little racist myself. He said, then I got to the military, and one of my best friends ended up being this black dude. And said, he said, and I figured out he's just like me. He just had a different color, you know, skin than I did. And then when I went to college, if I'm being honest, I just was ignorant, didn't know any better. I probably was too. Ended up one of my best friends, dude I worked with at Goody's Family Clothing, James Parks, black guy, ended up being one of my very best friends. Had a great time with that cat and still talk to him today. Just, you know, good guy. And so a lot of it, I think, is probably your environment, because we don't know any better. Here, it's just, you know, we don't see that. Whereas, like you said, you go to a place like that and you're working with everybody's cool, but then you go to the lunch table and everybody's segregated. It's weird.
Yeah, it's weird. It was weird. Yeah. I had a thought and I lost it again. I did that twice now. But
well, this is a tough one.
Well, one of the points I wanted to make sure I made is, first off, I don't agree with some of the cases the black community decides to pick up and protest about. I think they hurt themselves. This is a point too about the riots and the looting. All that, I feel like some of that stuff does is take away from the purpose of the protests, and it gives people who were against those protests to begin with ammunition and the ability to move the focus.
It like perpetuates the imagery of what these idiots that are out there anyway think about black people. Right. Is, well, look, yeah, you know, they protest, but then they go and break in, and that's not really what's happening at all. There was black and white people rioting. I mean, you know, looting.
Absolutely.
It was no different. I said, but it perpetuates that image that people want to believe is out there.
Yeah, but now, like when they rioted for the Michael Brown thing, I don't agree with that, man. You know, if I ever go to a protest, and I'm planning on going to a Black Lives Matter protest because it's an important issue as an American. But you know, I'm not ever going to put up hands up, don't shoot, because I don't believe that. Yeah, I don't believe Michael Brown was a martyr for this cause. I believe Michael Brown probably deserved to get shot like he did. I don't know that, but that seems to be what the investigation found. So right. There are times when the cops going to have to shoot some people.
Well, I mean, you had something happen last night in Atlanta where a guy resisted arrest. It was on video. The guy resisted arrest, tried to fight the cops, took their taser, tried to shoot at him, and they ended up getting a scuffle, and they ended up having to kill him. And I mean, he ended up dying. And then immediately somebody goes to a Wendy's and breaks out the windows. You know, not everything. What happened to George Floyd? Protest. Yeah. I mean, that was legit. But like you said, the Michael Brown thing, I'm like you. And so that kind of brings me to my next point is, what do you think the media's role in this protest keeping us segregated, trying to cause a divide. Because I swear to God, JD, and maybe I'm showing my ignorance here, but I swear if you watch mainstream media, it is like they want to create a race war.
Oh, it feels like that for sure.
It feels like that. And like I said, maybe that's just me being ignorant. But when it comes to the media, and it comes, my first really knowing about the Black community, I was like 15, 16 years old. I've talked about this on here before, feeling a little rebellious.
No.
I got an NWA Straight Outta Compton CD, and that was what I thought the inner city was like.
Well, it's your point of reference, man.
It was my point of reference.
Like you said, we don't have Black people around here. We don't see different people with different colored skin than us every day. We just don't. So our point of reference is, what comes through on our television, what comes through on our radio, what we see now on social media from all these things. So we have a skewed point of reference to begin with. And I really, really think that's why we have such a race issue here. I think that's why people are so slow to accept new races, because their point of reference has been skewed toward these, these guys that are flamboyant and disrespect women, and they are thugs or whatever. And they think that's all. They think those 5 or 10 represent the whole community, which isn't true.
Right. Well, and two, I mean, look, you watch a movie, what do they show?
Yeah.
Gangsters.
Yeah.
And that, I don't think that's right either. The very few Black people that I even know are pretty cool, nice folks and all that. But I feel like that the media itself, I heard Mos Def say one time on Real Time with Bill Maher that in his mind, racism is pretty much over because the younger generation is coming up and they don't see race. That's not a thing for them.
Right.
And you're going to have your outliers, your ignorant people. You're going to have, because there's plenty of those out there. But to him, that it was pretty much over. Do you think he's more right, or the stuff that we see on TV like this, like we're all at it with each other? I just don't think it's that way anymore. I'm sure there are stupid people out there who are ignorant and are racist. I just don't think it's that big of a problem anymore.
No, I agree. Actually, if you see these protests, like you said, you see, a lot of white people mixed in with those race, in these protests with the Black community, and I think it's wonderful, that to see people stand up for each other, and then so I think definitely racism is going to get bred out of this country eventually. It will get bred out of this country. Then when the old generation dies off and this new generation comes up, and I think we're kind of in the middle of that transition period,
right.
And so yeah.
And something too, I want to read you something here, JD, that Zach Briggs has posted. He said, the inner cities aren't sunshine and rainbows, guys. They're rough places with high crime rates. It's not a fairy tale. I live 20 minutes outside of downtown Columbia, South Carolina. And I don't doubt that at all.
No, but usually, and Zach, I don't know about Columbia, South Carolina, but what happens most of the time is a few neighborhoods causing all this high crime rates, and all this drug traffic and all this prostitution and all the things that, really drive a city down.
Yeah, I know. And you're right. I mean, and, it's like I read a statistic the other day that said, there are more white people killed at the hands of police officers than there are Black people, which is true. That's a real statistic. Yeah. But there's also 80 million more white people or something like that in the country than there are Black people.
Well, I think white people are 76% of the population. I think right. 13%.
13%, something like that. Yeah. But, there is an extremely high crime rate among African-American men in particular. Mm-hmm. And why do you think that is? Do you think, because look, Joe Biden, for example, who's running for president, was one of the key architects and authors of the crime bill that actually put so many Black men in jail for these crimes that were really, drug trafficking. They were getting sentenced, like crazy sentences. And then they're going in and they're not necessarily being rehabilitated. They're getting a master's degree in crime.
So I think it's the same thing you see around here with the generational welfare. It's the same thing in the inner cities. You see a lot of generational crime. My daddy was a member of the gang, and this is what they did. And then so it just gets passed on the same way, man. I think it's a lot. It's the culture they grow up in. I represent my street, my hood, and by whatever. And then it's a pride thing. When Johnson Central, or when Johnson Central was playing Bull County in the state championship game, that guy from Bull County said something bad about Johnson Central. or the East Kentucky, we didn't like it none.
No, sir.
So when people hear us talk about the inner cities, they're like, no, we don't know nothing about it.
Right.
But I feel like there's a lot of the same. First off, it's a lot like around here too, just with the west end of Louisville. Opportunity, man. Opportunity. There's not opportunity for these people. What are you going to do? Like, are you going to sell drugs and make $600 a week, or are you going to work at McDonald's and make $80 a week?
Right.
So we got to make sure we give people opportunities. Even in East Kentucky, these inner cities, people got to have opportunities to rise out of that. And people can, man. And I know there's cases of people doing it, but we need to remove some of the hurdles for it to happen.
Right. So here's something I want to talk about. And like I said, this may be the only place in this that you and I really disagree a whole lot is, and this is something that I believe, and my liberal friends on here may or may not like this comment. All these, we're going to talk about the monuments that they're tearing down, those things. The people that they're tearing statues down of were all Democrats.
Okay.
The people who started the KKK were Democrats.
Right.
The leaders of all these cities where you're seeing it pop off and nothing's being done, all that are all led by and have historically been led by Democrats.
Okay.
The Democratic Party, and this, I just want you to respond to this. This is why I'm asking, because I'm interested to know what you think. All right. So the black community has followed Democrats for 40 plus years.
Right.
Nothing's really happened.
Well,
I mean, look where we are right now.
So who gave
hold on. Let me finish and you can go. I'll let you go.
Go
You had a black president for 8 years.
Right.
Who did nothing to reform crime, the crime bill, or to reform that. Yeah. Yet people will call Donald Trump and the people who support Donald Trump racist. And Trump is the only president I can remember in recent time that's actually tried to work on the crime reform bill, which is something that really impacts these black communities, tears apart his family, things like that. So kind of give me your response when somebody like me, who's I don't know, I was a Democrat for years. I consider myself an old school Democrat.
Sure.
When somebody says that, like, what's your retort?
My retort is, you're right. A lot of these statues, those guys were Democrats. But the Democratic Party has changed a lot in the last 150 years. And the Republican Party has changed a lot in 150 years. If you was out right now in Inez and you've seen two guys in a Ford Ranger that had a rebel flag on the back, who do you think they was voting for?
Hillary.
Really? Really?
Yeah.
You would really think that?
No, I would not think that, JD.
What would you think?
Kidding. I was giving you a hard time.
Who would you think they'd vote for?
Oh, I figured they're voting Republican most likely.
Right. Why is that?
Just because more people in the South are, more Republican. I mean, as far as that goes, they're more, that's their ideology.
So I'm not going to do that. So Democrats were for slavery. That was the South, right? Mm-hmm. And then proclamation was made. Then the 13th Amendment come through. Then the 14th Amendment come through. Then we had the Jim Crow South, where the Democrats were still in control of the South. And then we had the civil rights, where what happened? Everything flipped. Now all the southern states are Republicans, and all the northern states are Democratic, or places with big populations. Because the Democrats they passed the Civil Rights Act. They gave black voters the right to vote. They gave women the right to vote. They've always been the party, well, not always, but since the 1920s, have been the party of the people, the voice for people who were voiceless. Not the party for the Republicans or the party of the businessman. That's the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. So that's my reaction to that. Is that a lot of things have changed in 150 years.
Right. So again, let me come back to that question. And this is not a gotcha thing. I'm just like, really, what do you think? Because the black community has supported Democrats for years, and it just honestly, and this is a total talking point, sure, that you'll hear on any mainstream channel that is conservative. but they only seem to show up around election time.
Right.
So why would the black community not give the Republican Party a chance?
Because, okay, my opinion is we talk about the economy being cyclic or cyclical.
Cyclical, yeah.
Yeah. And it is. Every time we get a Republican in office, the economy crashes.
Mm-hmm.
And the Democrat is coming behind them and had to fix the economy every single time. Reagan was in office, then George Bush Sr. was in office, and what Bill Clinton had to do? He had to come in, build the economy again. George W. Bush got in office, and what happened? Huge recession since the 1920s.
Now, you can't say that Trump's economy went down until
hold on now, let me finish.
Until three of the biggest things in history all happened at one time.
It's my turn. Obama came in and fixed the economy, got it growing. Then Trump comes in and it keeps the economy growing for a long time. But do you know we was in recession before the coronavirus came?
I did not.
Yeah, we started in the recession in February. Because now we're 3 years into his economy and his policies are starting to have effect on the economy and it's starting to tank.
All right. So Mr. Philip Wheeler, guest we had on a few weeks ago, our current state senator, has commented, said this is a myth. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 would not have passed but for Republican votes.
So who controlled the House and Senate at that time?
That I'm not sure.
It was the Democrats that did.
Yeah. So
they might have needed some Republican votes, but it flipped. The Republicans flipped the whole. From that day on, Republicans were now in the South and the Democrats were in the North. That's what happened. I know. And
again, like I said, I don't like to play gotcha with JD because I love JD and we have friendly debates all the time. But I heard two other things, and I haven't got to see you, so I wanted to ask you what you thought about these two things. One was Bomani Jones. You know who Bomani Jones is, sportscaster? Yeah. All right, so he actually made a comment. He was doing something with Matt Jones, the Matt Jones podcast, and they were talking. And he said that white people in the South hate all black people except for the ones that they know. And said that white people in the North like all black people except for the ones that they know. And then that follows up with Van Jones saying that the most dangerous set of people to the black community, and I could not, Mr. Whitelash himself, I could not believe he said this. He said, it's not the KKK. It's not the white supremacist. It is the white liberal.
Female. So I think is what he said.
Do you say white male? Okay, go ahead.
Female, I think he said. But anyway, because I get his point, and it makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because the KKK guy's racist. The Nazis are racist. But these people who pretend not to be racist, you don't know that until they show up. He was talking in response to that lady calling the cops on the black guy in the park in New York. And that's why he made the comment they did, because she was supposed to be a liberal. But you can't look at her and know she's racist. That's what his point was. It's not that he feels when people are greater danger to him. You just don't know that they're racist. Does that make sense? The KKK guy's racist. Sense. Yeah. And I think that was his point. And it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I don't know. I thought those were interesting. Those were two guys that I just, as far as I respect what they say, even Van Jones, because he seems like I don't agree with really anything he says, but I feel like he's coming from a good place or whatever. I hated that Whitelash comment, but when he said that, I thought, man, that's pretty crazy.
And the Bomani thing, I think that's kind of a spin on something that has been said since the Civil War era, mm-hmm. that the people in the South hate the race, love the person, and the people in the North love the race and hate the person.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. Like I said, those were interesting. So what do you like? You've been pretty vocal on here. We'll show you something real quick because it's going to sit here.
All right.
Yep. This is Ness, everybody. She's sitting here looking at me. What do you think? Because a lot of people automatically just call Trump a racist. And like I said earlier, he's the one president to me that seems like he has worked on the civil rights, the crime reform. How do you feel about Trump's response during all this?
Well, Jimmy Don, I feel like he's incited a lot of division and a lot of violence, honestly. Not one time has he talks about people coming together.
Mm-hmm.
He's talked about almost law and order, like he's wanting to break people down, and you're going to listen to me. You know, I'm going to really lay the law down to you, and you're going to do what I tell you to do. I'm going to break you. I would love for him to come out and say, hey, I empathize with your plight, but we can't be right in doing this stuff. So please stop it. Other than saying, oh, you know, and just that approach is not going to work. That confrontational approach, what are you going to get when you give out confrontation?
Yeah, confrontation back usually.
Right. And so I wish we had a leader that was trying to bring us together. And now he's, like you said, all the Democrats, these Democrats, mayors and Democrat governors, of course, Georgia governor's Republican.
Right.
But so then he stopped saying governors after that. And he just broke it down to mayors. But of course, the Democratic mayors are in cities where people are educated. And so most people, no, that's not a shot, but don't most educated people vote Democrat?
I don't.
Don't most educated people vote Democrat?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, you may be right there.
I mean, that's their base. And the Republicans' base is the right-wing working class, or, you know, Bible thumper.
Yeah. So my reaction is mixed, right?
Yeah.
Because I actually agree with the first part of what you said. I mean, he has come out and talked about George Floyd. I've heard him say, you know, we've got to be together. You know, we can't do this. This is America. But I am absolutely 100% for what he said about the law and order. And I think it's funny. I was telling you earlier, law and order. And then people will comment SVU, you know, and I think that's funny. But like, for example, what was it, a tweet he put out about the guy that got pushed over by the cops, that he was part of Antifa or something like that? It was stupid. I mean, that was silly. Unless it turns out to be true, then he's a genius. But I don't imagine that that's true. I thought that was stupid. I think he has
Antifa on a watch list, who isn't a group, by the way.
Now, you know better than that, right? Antifa is definitely a group.
Antifa is a movement, Jimmy. Now, there's not, like the KKK, they have registers and cards and all that stuff. Antifa's not like that. You know that, right?
That's interesting.
So he's put a terrorist group. It's just a movement, man. Like you could. So what I'm saying is, he can't prove anybody's an Antifa. He could say, Jimmy Don, I'm arresting you because you're Antifa, and you don't have to prove it. Can't prove it.
Oh, so you're saying there's not a registry? So the fact that there's not a registry doesn't make them a group?
I would think so, wouldn't you?
Well, I mean, no. I mean, you know,
How could you put a group on a terrorist list if it doesn't exist?
Dude, they wrote books. There's an Antifa hand guide. Keith Ellison, the guy in Minnesota, there's a picture of him with one.
There's one guy in the thing.
One guy. What do you mean? Look, there's.
What I'm saying is, how are you going to tell who's in Antifa and who's not?
I don't know, because they wear masks. They're cowards.
Well,
am I wrong?
You arrest them for wearing a mask. Then you say, "Oh, you was Antifa."
No, like I said, to say I have to push back on that. Antifa is not a group, because they're clearly a group. Now they may not be registered with the registry, but
how do we know who's in it, who's not?
Right. Well, no, you don't.
Huh?
No, you don't, unless you're Keith Ellison and you promote the book.
Right. But, so if he puts them on a terror watch, who's on the terror watch list then for Antifa?
Yeah, just the group, I guess.
That don't make any sense though. The KKK is not even on it.
No, Wheeler just texted or just messaged, I heard Antifa and their cohorts were making a registry and taking a head count in Chaz. So speaking of Chaz, what do you think about that? Like, what do you think about Chaz?
Well, I mean, I just know a little bit about it. I'm not real caught up on it, but I think it's crazy. It seems like silliness to me. I don't know if it's one of these things where the mayor's just going to let these guys rot themselves to death till they just get tired and go home, or what they're doing. I don't know.
Oh, that's funny.
I think it's silly. It seems silly.
No, I think it's silly too. And I think, when Trump says that stuff, I believe that he's talking about they can't do that. Like the mayor there, who's a Democrat, will not let the police chief. I love it. I knew you'd roll your eyes. That's one of my favorite things when I say stuff like this. JD rolls his eyes. It's like I do it for sport. Like the mayor there will not allow the police chief to come in and take his precinct back. Right. And I just think that's silly. Like that kind of stuff. We want change. And it is needed when it comes to how we are policed and how the Black community is policed. But we're not talking about destroying society here. We're, look, go to the house. And I know this is so cliche and so stupid to say, but really, if you don't like it and you want to live in that type of community, there are places in the country that practice that type of, not in the country, in the world, that practice that type of thing that you can go there and live. It's just, I don't think that supports our way of life.
Right. So one thing that we didn't talk about that I want to make sure we talked about these protests was the cops' involvement, or the cops they have any blame in this thing? Because every time I've seen that the cops have come in and set their riot gear down and empathize with the protesters, it's always been peaceful.
Sure.
So, like I just said, if you give confrontation, what are you going to get?
Yeah, no, you're definitely going to get confrontation. But I mean, I feel like in most cases, the police have done that. The only time that they've had to really act against is if there was rioting or looting, or, they were instigating that kind of thing.
Well, I mean, from a lot of the protesters I've seen, they're saying that the cops are initiating with the gas cans and the rubber bullets into peaceful crowds.
Yeah, I haven't. Now, to be fair, I haven't seen that, but that's that could be happening. So let's talk about a couple of things, JD, because we're already an hour, so I can't believe how fast that went. Yeah. So let's talk about the statues and the Confederate flag, for example. Right. And I want you to go first on your take about what do you think about the statues being removed, and then also about the Confederate flag.
Well, I'm gonna start with the flag. I think the flag is a traitor symbol. Those are people who fought against our country, and we got people who claim to be patriots waving the rebel flag. It doesn't make a bit of sense to me. The statues, I say we tear them down, man. If I was oppressed, if I was a part of that community that was oppressed by a person who owned slaves, who owned people in my family, and who died and fought to own slaves, own people as property, I wouldn't want to go to Town Square and look at his statue every day. And that's basically how I feel about it, man. That's it.
So for me, and of course my answer will be much long-winded because I am long-winded and like to talk. So first thing on the Confederate flag, I believe that if anything, there's only one flag for me, and that's the American flag. Okay. And I don't feel like I have a right, if there are people who want to, or they relate that to Southern heritage or whatever, if they want to have it, I don't feel like I have the right to tell them to take it down. But I also don't think it should fly over a state capitol, because that state capitol represents the entire state. And so I don't think that's right. And I laughed today. I was down at my sister's having Sunday dinner, and there was an old belt buckle that I had when I was a little kid. And it says, I almost brought it up here to show tonight. It's Confederate flag, and underneath it says General Lee.
Yeah. Which
was all about the Dukes of Hazzard for me. And you can't even watch the Dukes of Hazzard anymore. And that is a travesty, because they have that Confederate flag on the top. Bo and Luke Duke and Daisy. I know JD loves Daisy.
I am a Daisy fan.
Yes. And the Dixie and Uncle Jesse and all that, man.
And Jessica Simpson.
Right. So it's, it's one of those things where I get it. And I think if it bothers anybody, just like NASCAR said no more, that's fine. They're a business. They can do what they want to do.
Right.
But in your own home, whatever you want to do, if you want to fly a Confederate flag, that's fine.
I agree with that too.
Yeah.
I think it shows your idiocy.
Well, maybe, but like I said, there were some people that, I remember Dad talking about being in the military, that there were people who truly related that to being from the South. It wasn't about slavery to them. It was just like Southern pride. But I think there's just too much of a stigma on that flag, because there's a whole lot of racism attached to that, and slave ownership and things like that. So
if people act like they can, that's rebel flag is not racist. It's not a racial symbol. Of course it is. There's no way you can separate the two. The people who did start the KKK in Pulaski, Tennessee, were Confederate soldiers who fought under that flag.
Yeah.
They built a club based on the white man's superiority to blacks. So there's no way to get around that flag being a racist symbol.
Right. So, like I said, I don't know, as far as a racist symbol, I think I agree with that. I think that's definitely how it's portrayed. Now on the statues.
Yeah.
That's another one of those things, dude, where it's a slippery slope, in my opinion, that you cannot just erase our history. Okay. Those things happen, for good or bad. Right. Those things happened. Now, again, like our governor, Andy Beshear, took the Jefferson Davis, they're going to vote to take it down, and they'll take it to the national park or the state park, whatever it is. Like, for me, I also get that because, again, that Capitol is supposed to represent all the people of the state of Kentucky.
Right.
But he's also wanting to replace it with a statue of a black man, which overall I don't necessarily have a problem with. But I personally don't think you should put any statues in there. There needs to be a museum, whether it be like the Smithsonian or, someplace like that, just like the Holocaust Museum in DC. Nobody in Germany is, carrying around a Nazi flag and waving it because we all know what that means, right? So I can see your point with the
There's no statues of American soldiers in Germany either, I can tell
right.
you.
But you go to the Holocaust Museum and there's a whole history of what happened there. And history is important. You got to know your history. So I think destroying the statues is wrong. I don't think you should do that. I think they should take them down and then create a museum for these states and for whatever, that this is what occurred so that it cannot repeat itself.
Right. I don't have a bit of problem with that. I think a museum is a perfect place for things like that.
What about the Air Force? What about the bases, like the Air Force bases?
Well, I think why not? I don't have a problem renaming them. Like I know President Trump said, "Oh, we trained for two world wars training at those bases." But if we change the name, that doesn't change the fact that we trained there in one of those two world wars.
And I actually agree with that because, I mean, again, you want to change the names, these guys. It's one of those, it's like a real slippery slope. I do not. And people who just want to tear it down and go, you can't do that.
It's not that we want to tear it down. We just don't want people to have to be reminded of their heritage is a good thing, but that person's oppression is not.
Right.
So we don't need to bring up their oppression all the time. The way your family was treated all the time. Have to go to town square and see that all the time and be reminded of that.
Right.
What do you think? I got people on my Facebook that say if we tear down the Confederate statues, that we need to tear down the civil rights statues. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, no. I mean, as far as you're talking about the civil rights, the people who fought and won, like Martin Luther King, for example.
Absolutely. Rosa Parks. Yeah.
No, that's an important time in history, and that was a positive movement toward, for us as a country.
So my question has been always in response to those, who did these people fight to own? Who was they trying to oppress? They was wanting equality. They wouldn't want to establish themselves as greater than you. They just want to be with you. Mm-hmm. So to me, they're totally different things.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that's a good take. And like I said, as far as you can erase history, those things happened, good or bad, and we got past them. There is no slavery now, hasn't been for a long, long time. There is still some race issues, it appears, and we need to continue to work better, work to get better in that aspect. But as far as tearing our history down, you just can't. But I do believe that you should go to a museum or something like that, put it in something like that. I know I saw Wheeler. I saw you laugh. Yeah, but I saw that, we just got to remember our history.
Right.
And because history, you don't want to repeat it, those kind of things. And, we're going in a good direction. So I don't like the tearing and destruction of property. Don't agree with that. But I think that if you want to move those to a park, and then, like I said, it's had something historical about what occurred in our state and, those things, I think that's a good thing to do.
Right. So let's talk about this white privilege thing real quick.
Sure.
Something I want to talk about. I think there's a lot of confusion about it because of the label that's put on it. And I feel like people think if we say we have white privilege that we get extra special attention, which isn't true. That isn't what the term means. Only thing the white privilege says is that you don't have some roadblocks in your way that maybe some other people do based on the color of your skin. And that's as simple as I can put it. You agree with that, disagree with that?
Well, when it comes to white privilege, this is always the thing I say. I look around where I live and I don't know where my white privilege is necessarily, because growing up in the hills, it's a little different. And again, this is one of those things. I'm a white man living in Eastern Kentucky. I just don't, I will never know what it is to be a black man or a black woman. Growing up or living in the United States, I will just never know.
Well,
but it's also hard for me to say that we have white privilege because I work my guts out. I had to create opportunity for myself.
Sure.
And there's plenty of people in the black community who have worked their tails off and have gotten out and become successful. There's, there are leagues of black Americans playing ball. And maybe that's stupid to say, but there are. And there's plenty of people in professions that have gotten out and done those things.
Sure.
So I don't know, man. The white privilege thing for me is I don't know. I don't like it.
So, right. Because it's not good. It's not a comfortable term.
It's
But
really not.
I've never had talked to my kids about, hey, Chase, if you go on a jog today, be careful because you might not come back. You might get gunned down because you're white. I've never had to do that.
Yeah. No, me neither. I mean, me neither.
But black people have had to have that conversation.
Yeah.
With their kids. I mean,
well,
Aubrey, went on a run and got gunned down because he was black.
Right. And then, like I said, and I can't argue that either. As far as that goes, I can't argue with that because I don't know.
Right. But I'm just saying that's what white privilege is. It doesn't mean that your road to success is paved in gold.
Right.
It means that maybe some hurdles that some other people have, you don't have.
Because
just because your skin color.
Well, but I grew up in a place when I went off to college because of where I was from, people automatically thought I was stupid.
So that wasn't White Rivers. That was something different though, man. But nobody ever thought you was just, they had a different stereotype of you instead of the stereotypes that somebody else had, that a black person would have attached to him. You had a different set of stereotypes attached to you. That doesn't mean they were better or worse. It just means they were different.
Right. But I had that stereotype and here's Mark, I had that stereotype, but through hard work and just dedication and just a relentless, drive, I got past that. Like I would go down there and when they literally thought we were stupid because of the way that I talked and my name was Jimmy Don because I had two names, right? They thought I was stupid. And so I would work my tail off to make sure that they knew.
Wow. And
that's the part where the white privilege, but I've never been in a situation either. So it's hard for me to comment. Zach has commented several times here and he said, some use that white privilege as an excuse not to move forward. It's a fact. I see it daily.
I'm sure that's true.
And and maybe it is an excuse, the white privilege part. I don't know. Again, I'm a white man living in a place that's 99.9999% white. I don't know. And Zach again just said, grew up in poverty, dropped out of high school, did succeed only because I'm white. Which that doesn't make sense. He only succeeded because he's white. I'd like.
He's being sarcastic.
Oh, okay.
That's fine. That's fine, Zach. But I'm going to give you the testimony of a black guy who was successful, though. And he talked about this and the roadblocks that he had. He was an officer. He's now the United States Air Force Chief of Staff. I think it's Colonel Brown. And people, him being in a senior officer position, when he would say something, he was saying it as a professional airman. And they'd say, oh, we got the black perspective, Brown's here. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to worry about that. You're not a white guy. You're a guy.
Right.
If you stand on my porch and they said, describe Jimmy Don, white would probably be the last thing I say about you.
Right.
But if my buddy Mark Alexander was standing out there, one of the first things I would say about him, he's black. I mean, that's just the truth. And it's not a bad thing, but it's just how we describe people. I mean, you're a man. Like I would say Jimmy Don's a guy, and I would say, he's a black guy.
And that's the part for me that I've got to be more educated on, is, and let me ask you this question, because this is something, again, this is one of those things that have not come across right, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. So like I do daily, not daily, especially since all this stuff started at dinner, sit down with the kids and said, hey, look, got any questions about what's going on here? Why this is happening? I've tried to explain some historical things, give them some things to read. And I'm really trying to educate them on why you're seeing this kind of thing pop off, and trying to teach them not to be bigots, not to, it doesn't matter the color of your skin, if you're gay, if you're transgender, you're people, and you treat those people the way that you want to be treated. If you want to be, you're you're going to be called an ignorant hillbilly because you have a Southern accent. When you go off, people will automatically underestimate you because of the way that you talk. And you're going to have to fight that, know that, but that doesn't mean you be mean. You just outwork them and show them where we come from and why we come from, where we come from, and what we've got. So I'm teaching them that, but I almost feel like and this, like I said, is probably ignorance. And again, it's probably from our lens, but is that happening in other, communities, like in the black community? Or they teach, like I had a black friend, in college, a guy, dude, he was the coolest guy I ever knew. I don't think he was being raised to hate white people,
Right, no.
but do you think that's happening in all communities and all households across the country? Or do you feel like, because I almost feel like I have to.
I think most of them are. I think most of them, yeah. I mean, most people ain't privileged, financially and economically, and living in, but most people are having that talk with their kids.
Right.
In the West End of Louisville, you can guarantee Charles Booker's families are talking about growing up and doing better for yourself, regardless
Right.
of everything else. But I think Kenny Tackett, he made a comment, it's pretty interesting, said, if white privilege doesn't exist, then why are there practices put in place for equal opportunity employment? People saw the discrimination taking place and tried to fix it, to eliminate it.
Well,
that makes a lot of sense to me.
That's a fair point, because I mean, I had somebody explain it to me the other day. It was actually a very, fair thing. Is it's like starting a race, and one person is in their track shoes, their running suit, and they're ready to go, and the other person has the same gear on, but they have a shackle attached to their leg with a 100-pound weight that they have to pull. And about halfway through the race, you took that off. No matter what they do, they're not going to be able to catch up. So I think there were some things put in place for that, because that was real.
Right.
I don't call that necessarily white privilege. I call that allowing to, in my mind, I don't call that white privilege.
Right.
In my mind, that is allowing, because it was the right thing to do. They were held back for a long time, and you've got to give them the equal opportunity to obtain employment. Now, that's the equal opportunity. It's not equal outcome necessarily,
Right.
but it is equal opportunity. And I mean, I think that's fine. Same thing for women. The same thing had to be done for women,
Absolutely.
white women.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And so that's why I'm saying, is that a white privilege? Just to Kenny's point, is that a white privilege thing? I don't know. Because they had to do the same thing for women and create equal opportunity for women.
Right. But we did that, and then we had to do it again because, but it wouldn't be, first off, it would have been a gender privilege, right?
Right.
Now it's a color privilege. It's a white privilege.
Okay. Like I said, that's something I got to be educated on. I've kind of left it to myself to, to sit back, watch, listen to the leaders in the black community, and let them tell us what the right thing to do, is, because it's, like I said, I hate it when people talk about Eastern Kentucky and, what we need. And, you don't know what we need. You don't live here. Right. And, and so I'm going to sit back and listen and try to learn. I got a lot to learn. I'm going to try to learn and understand, and doing stuff like this. And I want to thank everybody, that's commented tonight. It's been really interesting, as to hear what people think. Been a lot of really good comments. Zach Briggs, Kenny Tackett, Josh Muncie, everybody that's commented. Yeah, it's been fun. And like I said, it's a topic that, it's just hard to talk about, JD. It is. And I told JD, I said, I haven't been nervous doing a show since probably after the first 2 or 3 weeks we started doing this until tonight. And I was actually nervous, about coming on here, but I'm glad we did it, because it was, I feel like I've learned a little more. I've got some things that that you've kind of brought out that I'm going to go, and our viewers, that I'm going to go and research and try to educate myself, man. And I think that's a lot of it, is trying to educate yourself on why things are going down the way they're going down, and do that for yourself.
I just say, man, just remind everybody to share this. We want to get these shares up. Our podcast is starting to blow up, really. So we really want to get you guys to share. If you don't care, go over to our YouTube channel, just subscribe. I don't care if you ever watch it, just subscribe. But really help us out. I appreciate all you guys hanging out with us, and the questions and the shares, all of it. Appreciate you.
Hey,
I appreciate you too, man.
I appreciate you, JD.
You're willing to come over on a live Zoom, talking about race, man. It's not easy. It ain't. But,
no, I'm scared to death. I was afraid I'd say the wrong thing. And it's not. And you asked me, so do you think you're going to say something that would be considered racist? And I was like, it's not that anything I believe necessarily I think is racist, but it's asking these questions. And I just don't want anybody to judge me through that lens because I don't feel like I'm that person. I just want to learn and understand. And that's the part that's scary.
Well, I appreciate you doing it, man.
Oh, it's all good, dude. I love you. It's, like I said, I just got a lot of respect, and we'll get all sappy, but I got a lot of respect for the things that JD says. And I got two more things I want to discuss, JD. I know we're way over, but I got two more things I got to discuss.
Let's do it.
So, one, and I didn't bring this up to you, but you made a post that like really upset me. And I don't get mad at anything JD posts, okay? Like, I enjoy reading JD's posts because I tell him I like to read intelligent discussion, things like that I think is not propaganda, okay? Like, I can't watch mainstream news. I just can't watch it because it's all propagandized. I don't care if it's Fox, if it's, CNN. I don't care what it is. It's all propaganda. And so I search out, conversations and different things. And that's what I try to learn through. And you made that post and it said, I can't imagine being the type of person that would vote for Trump right now.
I didn't say that. That's not what I posted.
Well, all right. Well, what did you say? I'm calling you out, Jack.
It said, can you imagine looking at America today and thinking, boy, we sure need 4 more years of Trump.
Well, you said I can't imagine being the type of person. So I sent JD a message and said, what type of person do you think I am? No, but as far as, that was something that, because I never get aggravated at anything JD says.
I can tell you, he's pissed. As soon as you text me, like, he's pissed.
I was upset, man, because, it was one of those things where I was like, well, what type of person does that make me? And it kind of went back to that whole discussion of, because I try not to look at people I disagree with as a type of person. They just have a different idea than me. Do you agree with that as far as, because I know you put it out there and I know you got a little bit of snapback on something you posted down on, but I wanted people to understand who you really are. And it's not that you, like I said, what type of person do you think I am? You said you're a good dude, who's misinformed or mistaken, I think is what it said. And so, but yeah, dude, it pissed me off. I was like, I cannot believe what type of person does JD Dameron think I am? I got so mad. That's the first time that's ever.
You, buddy?
Yeah, I know you do, man. But I wanted to bust your chops just a little bit for that.
I can take it.
I know you can. That's JD's. He's a good sport. Last thing, COVID-19.
Yeah.
I sent you a meme. You and Brad a meme that said, "What is it? Riot season?" I still got my COVID-19 decorations up. Yeah. It's almost like COVID-19 has disappeared. Now, I know that I've seen some things, cases seem to be going up as we try to go back to regular life, and I think that's going to happen no matter what. But do you think that there's going to be this massive second wave and we got to shut the country down again?
Man, I sure hope not, because I ain't trying to miss football season. I'm just going to tell you right now. Like, if all the things that's going on, I'm worried about football season, right?
Right. Well, me too, Jack. I've already paid for my season tickets for the Cats, and I'm and Eric.
Man, what's going to happen? It's a lot of people this writing though. Some things just are more important, though. You know what I mean? These rights. I seen a meme. I thought it was pretty good. It's like, COVID-19 is like some killer bees, but your friend's out there fighting the bear. You got to run out there and fight that bear and run through the bees and fight the bear, and then you go back to run from the bees. And I thought that was pretty good.
What was the other one? Did we just skip over Mad Hornets? I think that was one too.
I feel like we missed. Did we skip the Murder Hornets? Because I feel like we skipped them.
yeah. I thought that was pretty funny. I saw that when I thought
people are hilarious, man. The internet is the best thing in the whole wide world.
Yeah, I thought that one was pretty good too. So, did we hit everything, JD, that we wanted to talk about?
I think so, man.
Think so too. All right, man. So, look, guys, as JD said, share this live episode. If we get to 50 shares, we will randomly choose someone for $100 gift.
We'll do a drawing. Yeah.
We'll do a drawing. We'll give somebody $100. And as JD said too, go to our YouTube page and subscribe, because we've really started to grow. And believe it or not, JD, we do 5 more of these. We will be at 50 episodes of our regular show.
Right. We've
done more than 50 episodes, but we will be at 50 episodes. It's hard to believe when we started out just messing around, and now we've done 50 of these, and we've got a really good following, and we've got to, like I said, we've got the best audience ever. I said I couldn't thank the people enough that actually listen to us and reach out to us, and it's
people
a
come up to me all the time, man, like, oh man, trying to debate me. Like, hey man, why are you trying to debate me? You know I was debating on the podcast. Leave me alone.
Yeah, let me be. Yeah. So, but no,
you know I don't do that.
we want as many people as possible to go to the YouTube channel and subscribe, because we have to have 1,000 subscribers to be able to monetize. And so, and because we're looking to build a studio, we're looking to do some things and continue to grow this podcast. And, but like I said, man, we appreciate it, JD. You know, I love you, man. I appreciate you having the discussion with me. Brad will be back soon. Like I said, he's just got some work stuff going on right now that he just cannot get away from. So he'll be back soon. And then, of course, you can always check us out on Podbean. That's where we actually launched the podcast from. So go there and subscribe. You can get us on iTunes, on Spotify. Check out all the good work Eric's doing on social media. You know, we've got Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, the YouTube account, all those things. Go check us out. There's all kinds of good content there. So as we always end the show, from myself, from JD, and usually Brad, no matter how bad your week's been, no matter how bad your day's going, if you just add bourbon, it always gets a little better. We'll see you this week, guys.